Well, good morning, everyone here in the room. Everyone who is zooming in from Shanghai. I know a lot of people zooming in from China, from Asia. Good afternoon to the ones that zoom in from Australia, and good evening to everyone from the US. I've heard also people trying to zoom in from Europe. I'm really impressed. So good night. So anyway, so before I start, I'd like to thank Rafaela for inviting me to her art cafe. And I've said to a few people here already, I normally sit in the audience to admire the art of the presenting artist. So I feel really honored and appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to here today. So I'd like to start with a few words about my connection or relationship with photography. I've always been passionate about adventure travel and photography. And I always did a little documentary after each trip to share it with my friends. But this was a hobby. And in all hindsight, I had no clue about photography. I knew how to put together an interesting story, but I didn't know anything about composition. I didn't even know how to operate a camera except to find the button to release an image. And although it was still in the days where we had film, the camera fortunately was equipped with an auto mode so that I could get an image, because otherwise I would not know what would come out of this camera. So it was in 2012 when an email ended up in my inbox about a photography trip to Kenya. And I personally never wanted to go to Kenya, personally or purely because I found it's a touristy place and I always try to avoid places with a lot of people. But my husband really wanted to explore the wildlife there. So I thought, photography, maybe I'll learn a little bit about it, and my husband being happy in Kenya, so it's a good compromise. So that's when I met Scott Davis, and he's an outstanding wildlife portrait street photographer as well as photojournalist. And through several trips with him, I learned my skills for wildlife, portrait, and street photography. Now, when I came here to Shanghai in 2014, I did what I'm always doing. I walked the streets to explore a new place. And what I realized very quickly, that my eyes were not just drawn to the lively streets and the energy there, they were also drawn to these patterns and structures that you find on facades and indoors, or anything that shows cultural Chinese life. And I started to photograph these patterns, like, for example, this orange door here. And what I realized when I uploaded these photos into my computer, that there were materials, when I did the post-processing, which we normally do as a photographer, that there started colors to appear and structures that I wouldn't see with my bare eye. So I started to experiment with the color enhancement and the sharpness, and realized that the structures and the patterns I can complement with a color pattern and create an abstract photo. And I did that to an extreme that you normally not do in a portrait or a wildlife photograph, because it would look fake. But this was a method that I was able suddenly to express my feelings and, yeah, my fascination to Shanghai and China. Oh, where's the button here too? Oh, here. Yeah. So Edged is one of my earlier images. And when I saw these Chinese characters inscribed in the wall, expressing the feelings of people, I suddenly realized that the Asian or the Chinese world and the Western world that often feel so far apart have commonality. And that triggered a feeling of familiarity in me that was a step further to make or to call Shanghai my new home. Now, Spangler is an image of one of these beautiful rustic doors that you see when you walk the streets in Shanghai and in the Asian towns that surround Shanghai. And the traditional pattern here, that my eyes were drawn to that, and it enhanced to me the importance in Chinese culture to have a gateway between your family life, the private life, and the life outside. Oh. Now, when I started to explore and study more abstract photography, I incorporated more techniques into my shooting process, like moving the camera in certain directions or rotate the camera. And this is what I did in this image of fan here to accentuate the colors and the patterns. The fan symbolizes to me the hot and humid summers here in Shanghai. Now, when I first saw these coal briquettes in the Muslim market in Xi'an, I really didn't know what it is. My eyes were drawn to these patterns. And it took me a second look to realize that these are coal briquettes because they had, for me, this unusual shape. Now, to create this effect, I moved the zoom of my lens, and it created these colors and also these golden sparks. And these golden sparks just symbolize to me the warmth and coziness of an open fire in a cold evening. And I love to sit on open fires, not only in cold evenings, even the rainy evenings we have at the moment here in Shanghai, I sit in front of my fire. So I've been often asked whether I have a picture in my mind when I go out shooting. And at first I didn't have it all. I just walked the streets, whatever caught my eye, I took an image and just decided whether I like it or I don't like it. Only the more I was incorporating these moving techniques into my shooting process, the more I was able to predict a possible outcome. However, when I go out shooting, particularly when you go to unfamiliar sites, the shape of the landscape, the lighting, the weather, is just not cooperating with the picture you have in your mind. And that happened with this image here. So it was a gray morning, the light was flat, and the picture I had in my mind of these beautiful patterns of rice terraces with the water in there, the light reflecting, creating these beautiful colors that just didn't come out at all. So I put some movement into the shooting process and suddenly everything appeared, patterns, structures, and even a little color. So although it wasn't the image I wanted to create, it still expressed the feelings and the impression I wanted to visualize. So what I wanted to say is, even when I go out and I cannot create the image I wanted to create, sometimes something different appears. So the beauty of Shanghai is it's lit, or to me at least, these lit buildings at night. And they symbolize to me the energy of this never sleeping city. It took me about a year to form this idea in my head until I finally executed the image. And one evening I just said, now or never. So I shot it from my balcony. And Dolphin knows my balcony. I have a beautiful view. So, and the building was in a distance. It was not far distant, but it was distant enough that I needed a really long lens, a 600mm lens, which is pretty big, which I normally only use for wildlife photography. And on top of that, I only wanted to have the top part of the building. So I need to have the camera really high up on my tripod, and I couldn't look through the camera anymore. So I have this dining table on my balcony. I grabbed that, I climbed on the table, and then I started to move the camera as if I would paint these light patterns here. So by doing this, I tried to visualize the energy and the buzz that you feel in this beautiful city. I still admire. Now, whenever I travel, I try to explore the local life. And a lot of times I'm ending up in markets. I just love the energy of the markets, the buzz that's going on there. I don't like the smell that you sometimes experience so much. So sunroof is taken in a local market in the countryside, and the roof was tinted. And underneath the roof, there was this decoration of tons of different flags. And that caught my eye and started to visualize this picture in my head. So in order to create it, I moved the camera along the roof structure and in a half oval shape. And that created through the flags this pattern. But it also helped me visualize, a little bit the sun rays that came through the roof and caused this cozy, warm feeling. So my two China series, China's Modern Pulse and China in Color, they originated from the desire to express my feelings and fascination for Shanghai and China when I came to live in the country. Now, Entropy, the exhibition that Rafaela already mentioned that was displayed at ARTCaffè Gallery, and 3 of my series were connected to this exhibition. These series are developed more through a therapeutical, I have a difficulty with this word, therapeutical cure. And the reason I'm saying that is, it was March last year, almost to the date, when I traveled from the US to Taipei. And when I arrived in Taipei, my husband and I were sort of torn apart. Are we gonna continue our trip to China or stay in Taipei? My husband was really committed to his work and felt really strong that he needed to be in Shanghai, while I had this fear about not knowing what to expect in Shanghai. So I was torn apart between my fear and the feeling to support my husband. So we came to the agreement we would stay 14 days in Taipei and then try to travel into China without quarantine. Didn't work out. Anyway, different story. So while he went to work, I still dealt with this fear that caused a lot of stress to me. So I decided to choose some objects to photograph and grabbed my camera and went. Because photographing for me is like a therapy. It helps me dive into my own world and forget everything around me. So the series Disorder describes the sudden impact this unknown caused from the world perspective, the sudden disconnection between all the countries, the chaos that broke out, the disorder, but also the energy we all had to put in to transfer this unknown into a sort of known, to create a organized chaos, like a wait and see situation in which we are still nowadays. Now, to create this image or the series disorder, actually all the series, I used a new technique for me, which is called multi-exposure, where I layered several images on top of each other to create a new pattern. And that's what you see in this image and also in this image here. So, and the patterns are created in the camera, so not afterwards. So confusion is the second part or a second series of this, of entropy. And it describes more everything, the whole situation from the personal perspective, how I encountered the sudden changes that happened in the first few months in 2020. And to create this series, I combined both techniques, the moving of the camera during shooting and then layering the images on top of each other to create even a more special effect. And by combining these two techniques, I tried to visualize the sudden impact of blurred reality, fear, confusion, not knowing what to do, but also the journey of living with the fear and overcoming the fear. Now, series Trapped, and Rafaela mentioned that already. So it describes my feeling, and I think a lot of feeling of people here in the room. It is the situation where we all used to freely travel in the world and to see our loved ones. And although we feel very appreciative that we are living a normal life here in China and are thankful for it, but we do feel being trapped in this golden cage. I mean, a lot of us, we haven't seen our families and friends for over a year, and we're eager to visit them. Now, however, through this series, there is a transition where light is coming through the cage. It's like in this image here, it creates this golden path towards this light, like a light of hope on the other side, hoping that this door, which is a little bit open, but that it's opening wide to a two-way path. And we're hoping that this is really happening soon. Now, silent message is a product, I call it a product, that created or is created through a travel restriction that turned into an opportunity to more explore China's nature. And Dashan Mountain and Dunhuan Desert have been always on my travel list. And the experiencing the power and energy of nature in these two sites, similar to what I experienced when I was cruising Antarctica through the ice sculptures the year before, that suddenly triggered this desire in me to raise awareness for the silent message of nature, that we start to learn to listen to its guidance, to maintain and protect the beauty of this planet. And silent message contains 4 series. They're taken at 4 different sites and describe the beauty and essence of nature. And dialogue is one of the symbolic series amongst the 4, where the colors that you see in the images are, according to Asian culture, representing the elements that surround us. And when these elements are aligned in the right sequence, like you symbolically see here, they are in a balance. They are in a harmonic dialogue amongst themselves and the universe. However, when there is an external force that interrupts a dialogue, causes disharmony and a possible natural disaster. So these symbolic colors, they are a reminder to us that we need to protect the balance and the beauty of this planet or the nature. So in Yellow Treasure, we see the patterns and the formation of the sand dunes in Don Juan Desert. And I've been always attracted by the patterns of a desert. And when you are inside the desert, within these giant dunes, you feel the power of nature, where the wind, as a major sculptural artist, forms these beautiful sand dunes like a sculpture. But the desert is not only a beauty to our eyes, it also is a rich source of minerals that are essential to us. Now, Crystal Libra, this series actually reveals the essence to our life. The ice, the polar ice, plays a significant role in the energy balance of the world. It keeps the polar areas cool and actually makes the planet livable to us humans. So the ice acts as a reflector to the sunlight, so that less sunlight is absorbed in the sea and the temperature in the pole areas stay cool. But when we have a gradual temperature increase that starts to melt the ice, we have less surface reflection and more sunlight is absorbed in the sea and the temperature is rising. So we're ending up in this devil's circle of rising temperature, melting ice. And it's a circle that we have to stop. So these mesmerizing ice sculptures are the silent message to us to maintain the balance and with it the essence to our life. And Jewel Box is the final series of silent message, and it describes a geographical powerful event where Mother Nature opens a jewel box to us, where the colors are coming up to the surface of the Dashan Mountains. And these colors represent also a huge source of minerals that are essential to our well-being. And they're also a reminder that we need to preserve these beautiful landscapes. And finally, I'd like to raise what you already said, as although I'm sharing all my feelings, expressions through which these images have been created, I'd like to encourage you to keep a free spirit for your own interpretation and communication with these images, because that's the beauty of abstract art, and that's why I like to use it as a media of expression. So thank you very much for listening.